Hello, I'm Dale Ander and I'm a member of the Control Center Development and Support teams. Welcome to a series of videos covering the key capabilities of IBM Sterling Control Center. In this video, I'm going to teach you about the System Health Overview widget that you can see on the Control Center Web Console dashboard. And if you're interested, I'll show you how to adjust the values that you're seeing for your system, as well as how to understand some of the performance metrics that you're seeing and what you might even can do about them to prevent some problems. So let's get started. If you didn't know already from some of my other videos, Control Center is comprised of a whole bunch of services. The SLC service, the rules service, the event processor service, and one of them is called the metric service. And most of the services in Control Center, but not all, if they keep track of their own performance, then they'll register, quote unquote, with the metric service. And by doing that, the metric service knows that periodically it can query those services and ask what's going on and record it and make it in a way that you can see. Know that that these metrics, besides being able to see them on the dashboard, you can also know that they're stored in a log file folder called metric service CSV, and you can see them in a database in a table called CC metrics, and I'll tell you more about them later. The metrics service is something that's been in Control Center since the 6.2 release, but the widget that you'll see in the System Health Overview on the Web Console dashboard, it's been evolving. The one on the right is the original widget, or close to it, whereas the one on the left is the one we'll have in the 6.3.1 release. And know that it's still evolving, this widget. But if you want to use it, you can know that this means there are 0 metrics responding with a poor value, but 2 in caution and 32 in optimal. And if you want to see what these metrics are, one way to do it is just to click on the link that you see here. In the old widget, you would click here. And the reason that this is showing poor is because there are some poor values. If you have any metrics that are showing as poor, and I'll have to tell you more what these metrics are, if you have any that are showing as poor, then we're going to tell you that you're poor. Whereas everything is optimal, then it'll be optimal. Otherwise, if you have some in caution, some in optimal, then the state of the system is considered in caution. Know that the values that you see on the dashboard are the current average, and these averages are reset once an hour. Now, the averages can be computed periodically, and by default they're computed every 10 minutes. If you want to change that, you can go to the system settings and go to properties and find the metric service XML file. And the value that controls how often metrics are both refreshed and persisted is this one right here, this metrics updates per hour. And right now, like I said, it's because it's 6, that's every 10 minutes. I wouldn't make it any smaller, but I'm showing you what's gone on. And know that on your dashboard, the values are reset hourly and on the top of the hour, and every hour we persist the latest metrics in both the log file and the database. And when I say log file, I mean that CSV file. So depending on how you get to it, either by clicking on a link in the System Health Overview widget or by going to System Settings and then clicking on Health Overview, you'll see a table of metrics. You may see just the poor ones, just the caution ones, or the optimal ones. And you can sort by the event processor that they're occurring on, the metric area, or the metric type. I think by default, the sort you'll get is probably the best. Now, some of these values don't show a status. Some do. Let me tell you why and how to change that. If you remember on the previous page, all those rows with metrics had a pencil icon to the far right. And remember, some had status and some don't. The reason some don't have status is because they don't have a good or bad value specified for them. So the system does not know how to compute a status. If you want to see a status, then you have to specify a good and a bad value. You have to specify both. So to modify or to set a good or a bad value, you click on the pencil. And then you'll be presented with this a screen like this. We'll even show you what the current values are for that metric to give you an idea of maybe what you want to set for good or bad. There are some rules. First, without good and bad values, no status will be computed. Second, when a good value is less than the bad value, then optimal is when the system value is less than the good value. You want small values for how long it takes to do database I/O, so the good value is going to be less than the bad value. And when the actual values are less than or equal to the good value, well, then that's optimal. When they're greater than or maybe equal to the bad value, well, then that's poor, and in between, it's caution. But when the good value is greater than the bad value, maybe we're talking about an amount of free memory, then when the actual values are greater than the good value, as opposed to less than, when they're greater than the good value, then that's optimal. And when they're less than the bad value, then they're poor. And again, when the actual value is in between good and bad, then it's just considered caution. So if you want to see status, you have to set a good and bad value. If you want to modify some of your poors, or if you want to modify some of your, some of the ones that have a good and bad value, you should. Maybe the values for your system that represent optimal and poor are different than the values that Control Center was shipped with. And so you're able to modify them by clicking on the pencil and then entering what you feel are the correct good and bad values. You can also remove them too if you're tired of seeing a status value computed. If you want to see more than just the current averages on the dashboard, then you're going to want to analyze the performance of the system over time. And to do that, you'll need to use the data either in that metrics service CSV file, which has the data for the EP that owns the log file folder that it's found in, or by going to the database and using the data in the CC_metrics table, because it has data from all the EPs. I usually look at the data in the CSV file first. It's easier to deal with because it's a comma separated value kind of file. I can just open it in Excel. It's kind of straightforward. But when you do that, I'm going to give you some hints and how to make this a little bit easier. There's two things you should do. You want to make the columns wide enough to see all the data, and you want to sort the data so that the metrics values for each area and each type are kept together. And I'm not an Excel spreadsheet expert by any means at all, but I thought I'd share a few tricks that I learned. One, when you first open the metric CSV file in Excel, it always looks weird. You know, column A, a bunch of hashes, column C, a bunch of hashes. Let's fix, and I'll show you how to fix that. First, you want to resize all the columns. And the easiest way I found to do that is to click on that left triangle that I have the arrow pointing to, and then double click on the line between like columns A and B, where when a character with that vertical bar that you can see my excellent drawing of appears. So click on the left triangle right here, and then put your cursor here, and when this appears, double click and everything gets resized, and it's much nicer to look at. The next thing you'll want to do is sort this data, and to do that, at least in the version of Excel I have, you'll go to Sort and Filter, and then you'll want to click on Custom Sort. Know that this is the data that you'll see in column A, C, D, E, F, G, H, and its status is being computed in column I. Know that when a value is just a count, like for CD event inserts, you won't have values for column F or G. So that's a way to know that, oh, this is just a count, it's not an average. And know that the metric values are for the 60 minutes that precede the time in either column A or C, because remember, we're accumulating all this data for an hour, and then we'll clear what you see on the console and start the averages again, but we're persisting it in the database and in the CSV files. So to sort, I like this sort. I use D and then E and then C, because I've got my metrics areas together, followed by the type, and then by date time. And you'll see something like this. So I can see over time, for example, how many processes I'm summarized for a node type of 1, and know that node type 1 is connect direct. And if you want to know what all the node type numbers are, you can look in the database table called node_type. But 1 is connect direct, 3 is B2BI, and if you're interested in what the others are, you'll have to look in the table. Now, if you want to get really hardcore and you want to look at the data from all your EPs, you're going to have to go to the CC metrics table. And know that this scheduler service XML, another property file, dictates how much data is kept in that CC metrics file. And you can look at, well, what's the value of the DB metrics days there? By default, we'll keep 180 days from all your EPs. And this is the schema. We got the name of the EP and server ID. And actually, it's not the name, it's the reference to the CC server table. So you have to look up what ID goes in the CC server table, and then you can know the name of the EP. The metric type ID, the total, the count, the max, the status, and the date time, which is in UTC. If you want to pull data out of that table, I came up with this funky query. You can use it too. It produced output like you see here. There's a lot of things you can look at in the metrics data to ascertain how your control center is performing. You can look at in the event handler area, you can look at the event inserts to know when is the peak hour for events being inserted. Because if you knew that, you would know I certainly don't want to do any database maintenance then. And you can see, the second row, how long is it taken to insert events? It shouldn't take very long. You can see how long it takes to perform rule actions. If you have some rules that are doing like an OS command action and it's done synchronously, you'll see some long or large values here, and that's not good. The event monitor, that's the service that passes events on to the SLC service. So you have to use it when you have multiple EPs. I've talked about it in the debugging SLC video. You want to not have this be in catch-up very often. Here's more on the event handler. You can see when are the most events being processed by the event handler, because that's the busiest time in your whole system, most likely. And you want to keep the milliseconds low where it's retrieving the events. And likewise, you want to keep the milliseconds between when the action completed flag is. That's when the rule service finished processing those events in whatever EP they came from, and how long it took the event monitor to get them from the database and reconstitute them. This is about the file agent service. I'll let you read. Process summary service, that's the service that takes in events that are occurring on your EP, and the process summary service runs in all your EPs. It takes in the events from the node services that are assigned to that EP, or at least active on that EP, and summarizes them by turning data that it's getting into data into the CC process and CC file transfer and even the roll-up table. And we need the process summary service to be fast. And some of these metrics are about, well, how many processes are being summarized each hour? Another indication of when the system is busy. Another indication of when not to do database maintenance. You can see how long it takes a process summary service to get events out of the events table and some of the ancillary tables. It needs to be low. Database performance is key to good performance in Control Center itself. You can see how memory is being consumed over time. You can see the total free memory and as well as the maximum heap space. In general, you should see these values reach a steady state once the system has been up and running for a short period of time. Node services in catch-up mode. You want this to be low, because if it's high, that means Control Center's having trouble, if you will, keeping up with what's going on those monitored servers. At startup, you'll see these values be high, but over time, it should be low. So to wrap things up, you can utilize the data in the database table, CC metrics, or the metric service CSV files that you find in the log folder to get a good, relative quick feel of how Control Center is performing, good or bad. Remember that CC metrics has the data from all the EPs, whereas the CSV file, which are easy to consume, just have the data for a single EP. You want to make sure, at least in my opinion, that all database I/O is in the single small digits. It should never take minutes. There's some strings you can actually look for in the log files, the engine log files themselves, to know how performance is, and I've listed the values here, CCTR 135i or 138i, and excessive and inordinate. And if you really want to be a performance guru, you can click on this link below, right here. Well, that's all for now. I hope you enjoyed this video as much as I did making it, and at least I hope you learned something from it. Take care, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.